They say change begins with a loud cry, with the clamor of crowds and the chaos of protest. But I learned that sometimes it begins with a whisper. Sometimes it begins with a simple word, a word you speak not to cause trouble, but to claim your place. I didn't wake up that day expecting to take a stand. I was tired like most days, tired in my body, yes, but more than that, tired in my soul. Tired of swallowing silence, tired of watching dignity get pushed aside like it didn't matter. I wasn't trying to be a symbol. I wasn't trying to be brave. I just knew that if I said yes one more time to something I knew was wrong, I'd be saying no to myself, and that was a price I could no longer pay. So I said no, not with a shout, not with anger, but with a quiet, steady refusal. And that one word carried more weight than I ever imagined, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply not move. Let me tell you why the power of saying no still matters. Sometimes we think that saying no is negative, that it shuts people down, closes doors, or isolates us. We grow up being told to be polite, agreeable, flexible. And there's value in kindness, yes, but when kindness comes at the cost of our own truth, it becomes something else entirely: surrender. That's what we don't often realize. Saying no isn't rejection. It's self-respect. It's a boundary. It's clarity. It's the power of a person who has decided not to be moved by what's wrong. I remember the pressure that told me to stay quiet, to not cause trouble, to accept what had always been. It would have been easier maybe, but easier and always better. And silence, especially in the face of something unjust, can be just as loud as consent. So when I said no, I wasn't just saying it to the moment. I was saying it to a system. I was saying it to a fear. I was saying it to a long line of history that told people like me to know their place and stay in it. And yet, there I was. Tired, yes, but not just in my body. I was tired in my soul. Tired of pretending. Tired of the weight of unfairness dressed up as normal. Tired of the quiet voice inside me being ignored. That kind of tired doesn't get solved by rest. It gets solved by resistance. So I said no, and I want you to understand this. The moment I said it, I didn't feel weak. I felt still. Not loud, not violent, not angry, just still. And in that stillness, I found more strength than I'd ever known. Because this is what no does. It grounds you. It plants your feet when everything else is trying to push you around. It might feel like you're standing against the world, but really you're standing for yourself. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to fight to be powerful. Sometimes the deepest power comes from quiet certainty, from a decision that says, this is where I stop pretending. This is where I begin to live in the truth. And when that decision is made, when you say no with conviction, you're not just closing a door, you're opening space, space for dignity, space for new ways, space for others to hear that it's okay to push back too. I didn't know what would happen after. I wasn't trying to start a movement. I wasn't trying to be a symbol. I was trying to be honest. I was trying to no longer betray the truth inside me. And the thing about truth is, when you finally honor it, when you speak it even without words, the world has to listen, even if it takes time, even if it doesn't want to. People will tell you that saying no is being difficult, dramatic, or disruptive. Let them say it. The truth is, disruption is necessary when comfort has become a cover for injustice. Being difficult means you're no longer making it easy for wrong things to keep happening. And drama? Well, maybe a little fire is exactly what the cold silence needs. The world won't always reward your strength, but you don't say no for rewards. You say it because there's something sacred in knowing who you are and refusing to be anything less. You say it because deep down you know the cost of saying yes to the wrong things is far greater than the fear of standing firm. That's what I hope you'll remember, that your no is not a weakness to be hidden. It is a boundary to be honored. It is not a break in your path. It is the start of your real one. Every time you choose to protect your values, to resist what's unjust, to speak up for yourself or others, you are stepping into a legacy of courage, a legacy that does not need a crowd to begin, just one voice, yours. And that voice, when it says no with truth and clarity, is one of the most powerful forces in the world. Courage doesn't always come wrapped in grand gestures or loud declarations. Sometimes courage is quiet, a soft decision made deep inside your spirit that says, I've had enough. People think bravery has to look bold or loud, but the truth is it often starts with a whisper, a moment where you stop asking for permission and start listening to yourself. And in that moment, something shifts. You realize the power doesn't come from what's outside of you. It's been inside you all along. I've been asked before how I found the strength to do what I did. And the truth is, I wasn't trying to be strong. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just tired of being afraid. Tired of shrinking myself, tired of being told that I didn't matter or that I should accept things as they were. But when you live like that long enough, something inside you starts to rise. It grows slowly, sometimes painfully, but it grows. It's the seed of courage, and once it breaks the surface, there's no turning back. You might be scared when that moment comes. That's normal. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the choice to move forward anyway. It's the moment you decide that even though you don't know what's going to happen, you can't keep living like you have. You can't keep saying yes to what breaks you down. You can't keep pretending that silence is safety. So you stop and you say no. And even if your voice shakes, even if your knees tremble, that no becomes your stand. It becomes the moment you reclaim your story. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know how people would react to what they would say or how things would change, or if they would change at all. But I knew one thing. I was done allowing fear to make my choices for me. I had spent too many days letting the world decide my worth, and too many nights folding my voice into silence. That moment wasn't planned, but it was prepared. My whole life had been preparing me to choose courage over comfort. And here's the thing about courage, it's contagious. When one person stands, even quietly, others start to feel like maybe they can stand too. Maybe they can speak. Maybe they don't have to go along with what feels wrong anymore. Your courage creates space for others to find their own. That's why the first step matters so much. Not because it changes everything overnight, but because it breaks the pattern. People underestimate the first step. They think if it's not big, it's not worth it. But the first step is everything. It's the beginning of the unraveling. The moment the lie starts to come apart, and when one lie breaks, others follow. The lie that you're powerless, the lie that you don't matter, the lie that nothing will ever change. Those lies start to lose their grip the minute you stand up and say, no more. The power of that first step isn't in how loud it is, it's in how true it is. And that truth, once spoken, echoes far beyond the moment. It moves through people, it moves through time, it finds its way into hearts and minds, and it lives there, whispering, you can say no too. You don't have to wait for the perfect time. You don't have to wait until you're no longer afraid. You just have to decide that your fear no longer gets to lead, that your truth matters more, that your spirit deserves better. And when you do, something remarkable happens. Fear starts to lose its power. Not all at once, but enough. Enough for you to take that next step and the next. People might not understand. They might question you, doubt you, even push back against you. But courage doesn't require agreement. It only requires conviction. It requires that you know deep down that doing what's right is more important than doing what's easy, that integrity matters more than approval, that dignity matters more than comfort. And even if you're the only one standing, you'll still be standing in your truth. And that's a place no one can take from you. So don't wait for the world to make it easy. Don't wait until the path is clear or the crowd is cheering. Courage often begins in the quiet, with one person, one choice, one step. It begins the moment you say, I will not move, not because I am stubborn, but because I am certain. Every time you say no to something that doesn't sit right with your spirit, you're saying yes to something deeper, something more true to who you are. That's what people often miss. Saying no isn't about pushing the world away. It's about making room for what matters. It's about clearing the noise so your soul can finally breathe. We live in a world that keeps asking us to give in, to go along, to stay quiet for the sake of peace. That peace without truth in peace, it's just silence. It's just survival. And I don't believe we were made only to survive. When I said no, it wasn't just about what I was refusing. It was about what I was making space for dignity, for fairness, for a different way forward, not just for me, but for all of us. And that space didn't exist until someone said no. Sometimes that's what it takes. One person willing to draw a line, not out of anger, but out of purpose. One person willing to protect what's right, even if they have to stand alone to do it. Too many of us are carrying weight that doesn't belong to us. We say yes when we mean no because we don't want to upset anyone. We say yes to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, to not rock the boat. But after a while, all those yeses pile up and suddenly we're drowning in a life that doesn't reflect our truth. That's not kindness. That's quiet surrender. That's how we lose ourselves, one compromise at a time. But when you say no, not with bitterness, but with clarity, you begin to take that self back. You begin to reclaim your energy, your attention, your time. And that's powerful, because what you say no to defines what you have room to say yes to. And when you start protecting your time and your values, you start building a life that feels whole. No isn't just about resistance, it's about realignment. It's about turning your back on what drains you so you can turn toward what fuels you. When I refused to move, I wasn't only drawing a boundary, I was creating space for something new to begin. I didn't know what would come from that space. I didn't know what it would cost, but I knew what it had already been costing me to keep pretending everything was fine. Sometimes the cost of staying quiet is far greater than the cost of speaking up. We think we're keeping things easy by not resisting, but what we're really doing is allowing harm to settle in. Saying no is how we interrupt that pattern. It's how we open the door to change. And yes, change can be uncomfortable. It can be slow, but it always begins with a decision, a line in the sand. There's something sacred about the space you create when you stop letting the world push you into places you no longer belong. That space is where healing begins. It's where vision is born. It's where your voice gets louder, steadier, stronger. And before you know it, others are drawn to that voice, not because it demands attention, but because it speaks from conviction, because it tells the truth. And truth always finds a way to echo. I've learned that not everything that's offered deserves to be accepted. Not every invitation deserves your presence. Not every expectation deserves your energy. You get to choose. That's the beauty of no. It's a choice, one that tells the world, I know who I am, and I know what I won't accept anymore. And don't let anyone tell you that you're being difficult for choosing yourself, that you're being dramatic for protecting your peace, that you're being selfish for refusing to carry what's not yours. It takes strength to say no in a world that rewards obedience. It takes clarity to walk away when others tell you to stay. And it takes deep inner knowing to create a life that's built on your values instead of someone else's expectations. What I want you to remember is this: every no makes room. Room for your voice, room for your truth, room for something better than what you were told you had to settle for. You were not put here to simply go along. You were put here to stand in your own light. And sometimes that light only shines through when you stop dimming it for others. That's why saying no is not the end of anything, it's the beginning of everything. People often expect resistance to come with noise. They expect shouting, fists raised high, crowds marching down streets. And yes, sometimes it does come that way, but not always. Sometimes resistance is quiet. Sometimes it sits still, unshaken, unmoved. And that stillness becomes more powerful than 1,000 voices screaming at once. We are taught to associate power with volume, with dominance, with control. But there's another kind of power, a deeper one. The kind that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to bend. When I said no that day, I didn't raise my voice, I didn't argue or cause a scene. I just decided. And in that decision, I felt more powerful than I ever had. Not because anyone else agreed, not because anyone else joined me, but because I had finally stopped running from my own truth. That quiet refusal held more weight than a dozen speeches, because it was real, it was rooted, it came from a place no one could touch. We live in a world that often mistakes quiet for weakness, but there is strength in being steady. There is force in being still. Think of a mountain. It doesn't shout to prove its power, it simply stands. That's the kind of strength I'm talking about. The strength that says, I will not be moved, not because I hate you, not because I'm angry, but because I know what's right, and I will not give that up. Some people thought what I did was small. They said it was just one moment, one decision, one seat. But that's how change begins, not with explosions, but with pressure. Silent, steady pressure. The kind of pressure that doesn't go away, the kind that says, we're still here, we're still standing, we still believe in something better. There's a quiet kind of courage that doesn't always get attention. It doesn't make headlines or stir up drama, but it's the kind of courage that lasts. It holds the line when others have given up. It keeps believing when the world says it's pointless. It refuses to compromise, even when compromise would be easier. And in a way that makes it even more dangerous to the systems that depend on our silence. Sometimes people ask what it felt like to sit there and refuse. The truth is, I wasn't thinking about the consequences. I wasn't planning a revolution. I was simply listening to something inside me that said enough. That voice had always been there, quietly, under the noise of fear and doubt. But in that moment, it rose up, not loudly, but clearly, and I followed it. I've come to believe that quiet resistance is one of the most underestimated forces in the world. It doesn't always get praised, it doesn't always get understood, but it changes things. It forces people to look again. It creates discomfort in the status quo, and sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to fight to make a difference. You just have to be firm in what you know is right. That's enough. That's where change begins. In the moment when you choose truth over convenience, when you choose dignity over fear, when you choose to hold your ground, even if your voice is shaking. And if you think that stillness isn't noticed, think again. People notice when someone doesn't move. They notice when someone refuses to play along. They may not say it out loud, but they feel it. That quiet stand challenges something in them. It makes them ask questions. It makes them wonder what they would do. It stirs something that's been sleeping. Resistance doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And that whisper, when it comes from the heart, can echo for generations. It plants seeds in places you can't see. It gives courage to people you'll never meet. That's the beauty of a quiet no. It travels, it lingers, it stays with people. So don't let anyone tell you that power always needs to be loud. Don't let them tell you that if you're not making noise, you're not making change. Some of the most powerful acts in history were quiet, still unshaken, and they changed the course of everything. You don't need to raise your voice. You just need to raise your truth. There's something people don't always understand about saying no. It isn't just a refusal, it's a release of guilt that was never yours to carry, a release of fear that kept you small, a release of shame that someone else tried to put on your shoulders. Saying no, especially when you've been taught to stay agreeable, isn't just an act of strength. It's an act of healing. It's a step toward freeing yourself from everything that tried to convince you that your value depended on your silence. I didn't grow up thinking I was allowed to say no. I was taught to respect, to comply, to keep the peace. And for a while I did. But there's a danger in peace that comes at the expense of truth. There's a danger in politeness when it becomes a mask for pain. That kind of peace isn't peace at all. It's pressure. A pressure to keep smiling, to keep going along, to keep making room for everything and everyone but yourself. But there comes a time when your soul can't carry that anymore. When you feel the weight of those expectations pressing down on you, and you realize that pleasing people and protecting your peace are not always the same thing. That's when the healing begins, when you let go of the need to be understood by everyone and instead decide to be honest with yourself. When you stop apologizing for drawing a line that should have been drawn a long time ago. I remember the feeling, not of fear, but of clarity. It wasn't anger that moved me, it was something deeper. A knowing that I could no longer betray my own spirit just to make others comfortable. That I couldn't keep sitting in a place that told me I didn't matter. Saying no wasn't just an answer, it was a declaration. It was me telling myself, you are worth standing up for. And in that moment, I began to let go of the lies. The lie that being quiet would keep me safe. The lie that going along would make life easier. The lie that I didn't have the right to take up space. That's what many of us are healing from, the belief that our voices are too much or not enough. But healing starts when you say no to those lies. When you speak truth, even if it shakes in your chest, it's not always easy. There will be moments when you doubt yourself, when people question your decision, when the world looks at you and says, why are you making this so hard? But I've learned that doing what's right and doing what's easy are rarely the same thing, and choosing your truth will often come with resistance. Still, it's the only way to be free. Freedom doesn't always come wrapped in celebration. Sometimes it comes quietly in the form of one brave word. And every time you say it, every time you choose yourself, you're stitching yourself back together. You're restoring what was broken by years of being told to sit down, be quiet, stay small. Healing doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like one quiet decision after another to no longer betray yourself. When I said no, I wasn't just thinking of myself. I was thinking of everyone who had ever been told to accept less. I was thinking of those who who had whispered their pain behind closed doors because the world wouldn't listen. I was thinking of the generations who had carried burdens they never asked for, and I knew that if I stayed silent, I was passing that burden down again. I couldn't do that, not anymore. So I stood still, I drew a line, and in doing so, I began to heal, not just for me, but for others, because that's what healing does. It spreads. It gives others permission to stop apologizing. It shows them that they too can say no without guilt, without shame, and maybe they'll find their voice a little sooner than I found mine. Maybe they'll care a little less of the weight. You see, when you heal, you don't heal alone. Every no you say with integrity echoes beyond the moment. It creates space for others to rise. It tells them they are not alone, that they don't have to keep sacrificing their well-being for the comfort of others, that their peace matters too. So don't let anyone tell you that saying no is selfish. It's sacred. It's necessary. And sometimes it's the only way to truly say yes to yourself, to your healing, to a future where truth is not something you whisper, but something you live out loud. Saying no is how we begin to return to ourselves. Some people think that saying no is the end of a conversation, but I've come to see it as the beginning of something far more powerful. It's the start of building boundaries that protect your worth. It's the start of reclaiming your time, your energy, and your voice. And more than anything, it's the beginning of real, lasting self-respect. Because when you say no with intention, you're not just turning something down. You're standing up for what you know you deserve. We are taught to keep giving, to keep sacrificing, to always say yes, especially when we're afraid that saying no will disappoint someone or cause conflict. But the truth is, your worth doesn't lie in how much you endure. It lies in how deeply you honor yourself. And that begins the moment you decide to stop making yourself smaller to make others more comfortable. Make excuses, make them comfortable, try to make sense, to make time. I had people tell me that what I did was bold, even defiant. But I didn't feel defiant in that moment. I felt grounded. I felt still. I felt maybe for the first time that I was doing something for myself, not against anyone, but for something. For respect, for peace, for the simple truth that I should not have to accept less than any other human being. And it's that kind of truth that transforms a simple no into a declaration of dignity. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are doors that you choose to open or close based on what is good for your spirit. They're not about being distant. They're about being clear. They tell others how to treat you by showing how you treat yourself. And when you have the courage to say no, even when it shakes you, you are telling the world, I will not abandon myself to make others feel more comfortable. Too often we learn to tolerate what breaks us. We tolerate unfairness, we tolerate disrespect, we tolerate silence just to keep the peace, just to keep things moving, just to avoid making a scene. But the cost of that tolerance builds over time, and one day you realize that you've given so much of yourself away that you barely recognize what's left. That's when the no becomes a lifeline. I remember thinking that people might not understand my decision. I knew it would be questioned. I knew it would be uncomfortable. But I also knew I couldn't keep going along with what felt wrong. That saying yes again would have meant turning my back on what I knew to be true. And there's a kind of pain that comes from betraying yourself, a quiet ache that follows you. I was done with that ache. It takes strength to choose discomfort in the short term in order to protect your peace in the long run. And let me tell you, sometimes peace doesn't feel peaceful at first. It feels like being misunderstood. It feels like people pulling away. It feels like standing alone. But eventually it starts to feel like freedom. It starts to feel like truth, like rest, like coming home to yourself. When you begin to build boundaries, not everyone will be ready for them. Some will challenge them, some will take offense, but you can't control how others receive your no. You can only control the truth behind it. And that truth is what will carry you when everything around you feels uncertain. That truth is what will protect your heart when the world asks you to keep giving more than you have. Saying no is not about closing off your heart. It's about protecting it. It's about choosing relationships and spaces that honor who you are instead of ones that only love you when you're silent. It's about choosing to stop performing and start living in alignment. And that's what real freedom looks like. It's okay if your voice shakes. It's okay if the words come out softer than you wanted. What matters is that they come out at all. What matters is that you no longer say yes to what steals your peace, that you no longer let guilt write your decisions, that you stop waiting for the perfect moment to value yourself. There may never be a perfect moment. There may never be a loud chorus of support. Sometimes it's just you in the quiet knowing that you deserve better, and that is enough. That's where the rebuilding starts. That's where the boundaries form. That's where you begin to step into a version of yourself that is no longer shaped by other people's expectations. You were not born to keep saying yes while your spirit whispers no. You were born to stand in truth, even when that truth is inconvenient, even when it costs you comfort, even when it leaves you standing alone for a while, because that kind of stand builds a foundation no one can shake. Saying no is not about rejection, it's about protection of your purpose, your peace, your personhood, and every time you honor that with clarity and grace, you teach the world how to treat you, you teach yourself how to trust you, and that more than anything else is where true power begins. We are not here to be silent witnesses to our own lives. We're here to take up space with truth. Every time you say no to what dims your spirit, you say yes to what strengthens it. And when enough of us choose that courage, not just once, but again and again, that's how change begins to take root. Not always loudly, not always quickly, but deeply, unshakably. And when that happens, the world can't help but shift. So if your voice trembles, let it. If your stand is quiet, let it be. Just don't let the world convince you that your power lies in pleasing others. Your power lies in knowing who you are and refusing to be moved from that truth. That is how we begin to rise.